Web3 has always promised this grand decentralized future, right? But what if the only way to get a billion people to show up is to build something that looks a lot like the centralized world we already have? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating case study on the BNB chain, and it's super pragmatic, some might even say controversial, Amazon-like strategy to win the market. This is all based on a great deep dive analysis by BGVC. All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll tackle the massive problem that BNB chain was designed to solve. Then we'll get into its Amazon business model. We're going to look at the hard data to see if it actually worked, get real about the critical trade-offs they made, and finally, check out their game plan to stay on top. Okay, first things first, the billion user problem. You see, to really get what makes BNB chain tick, you have to understand the huge roadblock that was basically keeping everyday people on the sidelines of Web3. So what was really holding everyone back? I mean, why wasn't everyone jumping into Web3? It wasn't just that the tech was complicated. No, it was something much more basic. The user experience was, frankly, just awful. I mean, think about it. You and I are completely used to the Web2 world. It's instant, it's seamless, and most of the time it feels free. But early Web3, it was the total opposite. We're talking crazy high fees, waiting forever for confirmations. It was just a mess. You couldn't build a fun game or a social app on that stuff. It was a playground for the crypto diehards, and that's about it. And that is exactly the problem BNB chain was built to solve. They took a completely different path. They weren't just trying to build another blockchain. They took a page from Amazon's playbook and built a pragmatic solution to go after that massive, untapped market. And this analogy from the BGVC analysis just nails it. They call it the Amazon of Web3. Think about it, a business empire that brings together a marketplace, a logistics network, and cloud services, all focused on one thing: ultimate efficiency and scale. So let's unpack what that really means. Okay, so here's how their whole integrated system works. First, you've got the BNB Smart Chain. That's the marketplace. It's the foundation where all the apps live. Then you've got OptBNB. That's the logistics network. It's a super fast layer for handling tons of transactions for super cheap. And finally, there's BNB Greenfield. That's their version of Amazon Web Services, a place to store all the data. By owning the entire stack, they make it super easy for developers to build and, pretty hard for them to leave. So the big question is, did this whole Amazon-style strategy actually pay off? Well, the on-chain data doesn't just talk. It pretty much screams a story of total market dominance. Get this, by late 2025, the ecosystem had a whopping 4.4 million people using it every single day. That's not just a user base. That's a massive competitive advantage. It's a huge, active community that's incredibly difficult to compete against. And here's the secret sauce for attracting that huge retail market: an average transaction fee of just 1 cent. A penny. That's what makes things like Web3 gaming and social media not just possible, but actually practical. The cost of using the network basically vanishes. And when you zoom in on these numbers from Q3 2025, the sheer scale is just wild. We're talking over 4.3 million daily users, 134 million transactions in a single week, and almost $9 billion locked up in the ecosystem. It's an absolute powerhouse. And all this incredible activity creates this powerful flywheel effect, right? You've got these DeFi giants like PancakeSwap, which is basically the network's central bank, holding nearly 28% of the value. That deep pool of money attracts more users, which in turn attracts more top-tier projects, and the whole wheel just starts spinning faster and faster. But, and this is a huge but, all of this amazing performance didn't come out of nowhere. It was a result of a very deliberate trade-off. And this trade-off is the source of the platform's biggest, most fundamental risk. So to really get our heads around this risk, we need to talk about something called the Nakamoto coefficient. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's just a score that measures decentralization. It asks one basic question: how many key players would need to team up to compromise the network? The higher that number is, the safer and more decentralized the network is. So what's BNB Chain's score? It's 7. Just 7. Think about that. In theory, it means you only need 7 entities to collude, and they could disrupt the entire network. That's not just a small risk. That's a massive centralization red flag. This risk really comes from three main areas. First, there's a tiny group of only 45 validators actually securing the network. Second, the token ownership is super concentrated. The top 11 wallets control over half the entire supply. And third, the elephant in the room, its undeniable foundational link to Binance, which brings both corporate influence and a whole lot of regulatory attention. And this centralization problem puts BNB chain in a really tough spot, almost like a strategic pincer movement. On one side, you've got competitors like Solana, which offers similar high-speed performance, but with over 2,000 validators, making it way more decentralized. And on the other side, you've got Ethereum's Layer 2s, which are widely seen as the gold standard for security and decentralization. BNB chain is caught right in the middle. So what's the plan? How does BNB chain defend its turf when it's getting squeezed from both sides? Well, the strategy is to move beyond its first advantage and build a brand new, even more defensible moat for the future. Step 1 is a wildly ambitious tech roadmap for 2026. The goal isn't just to be fast for a blockchain. They're aiming to be as fast as a centralized financial exchange. We're talking over 20,000 transactions per second. They're also planning to roll out things like Mega Fuel to make gas fees completely invisible, basically making the whole experience feel just like using a Web2 app. But it's not just about getting faster. The real long-term power play is to become the essential plumbing for the next two huge waves in technology. First, real-world assets. That's things like putting U.S. Treasury funds directly on the blockchain. And the second big one is artificial intelligence, positioning themselves as the go-to data and development platform for AI models. So this all brings us to the bottom line. BNB chain is standing at a critical crossroads with a massive opportunity ahead of it, but also some very significant risks to navigate. All right, let's just boil this all down to three key takeaways. 1, BNB chain was built for scale, not for ideology. It made a very practical trade-off, choosing speed and low cost over pure decentralization. 2, the Amazon of Web3 model is real. They built this all-in-one ecosystem that's designed to be sticky. And 3, it's facing a central dilemma. Its future success depends completely on managing the risks that come from its own centralized design. So really, what you should take away from all this is that one fundamental tension. BNB chain's greatest strength, its efficient, centralized Web2 style approach, is also its greatest weakness in a world that claims to be all about decentralization. And it forces us to ask a really interesting question. Can you actually win the future of Web3 by looking so much like Web2? Which leaves us with one final, provocative question to think about. Can a centralized giant truly win a decentralized future? Thanks for joining this explainer.